Congressman Peter King is holding hearings on the alleged radicalization of American Muslims. Many conservatives say the probe is long overdue, while many Muslims and those concerned with religious and civil liberties are voicing opposition. Here to discuss the hearings is Jarrett Murphy. Jarrett is editor-in-chief of City Limits magazine. Hi, Jarrett.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. I hope you are too. Does the House Homeland Security Committee hearings serve a useful purpose? Will they shed light on any threat?
It's hard to tell. It depends on, and I think a lot of people have said this, to what extent they distinguish between people who are jihadized and with radical or, more importantly, violent tendencies, and other people who fit a sort of vague profile that some folks have of what a dangerous person, or especially a dangerous Muslim, might be.
Now, back in 2008, City Limits published an article examining the state of civil liberties in New York City. What were the findings in that article?
What we found was that, perhaps not surprisingly, the city liberties had been rolled back quite a bit since September 11th, kind of across the board, from searches of people's bags on subways to the proliferation of surveillance cameras without a lot of study or rigor in terms of how that footage was used, to infiltration of certain communities and questions about the federal government's ability to get library records. And one important part of our report was a look at an NYPD study into alleged jihadization of the city's Muslims, which has kind of been a big question mark. That was really posed after the 2005 London bombings of whether Muslims here would be similarly violent. And the report stirred a lot of controversy because it cast kind of a broad brush approach to looking at patterns of behavior and which ones necessarily marked someone as a potential threat.
Jarrett, what was the NYPD doing specifically? And I imagine they're still doing it.
Well, at the time, there was a very high-profile case in which an infiltrator, a confidential informant working for the police, had gone into a few of these communities and had found people who eventually got embroiled in a plot to bomb Herald Square subway station. There are a lot of questions about whether that kind of infiltration was actually detecting real threats, whether it was helping to create threats. And it's assumed that that sort of infiltration and intelligence operation continues, although obviously we don't know exactly what the police are up to.
The federal government does that all the time and have been for many years. Is that a new activity for the NYPD?
It is. The NYPD has earned a combination, depending on who you talk to, of praise and scorn for its post-9/11 intelligence operation. The NYPD has agents, officers I should say, in several foreign cities. It has a very active counterterrorism and intelligence operation. The intelligence operation is headed by a former CIA official. So it is a new territory for the NYPD. There is evidence that in some cases it has worked to prevent attacks, but it obviously has stirred controversy too because of the always dangerous mixture between regular law enforcement and intelligence, which are actually very, very distinct ways of working.
If we could come back to Congressman King's hearings for just a minute to wrap things up, what's the likely outcome of those hearings?
I think the outcome probably will be some new information about what the people who do this for a living, the FBI and the Justice Department, what they think about whether this threat is there and how large it is. Hopefully, one outcome won't be that Muslims who are not engaged in this and abhor violent activity, that they don't feel alienated by that. I think that's one of the worries, is that by probing into this and by not being careful about it, you can alienate people who should be allies. Many people in the city's Muslim neighborhoods oppose terrorism and are active in that. And the problem is, the hope is that you don't sort of paint them into the same corner that you do the more violent people.
Jarrett Murphy. Jarrett is editor-in-chief of City Limits magazine. Thanks, Jarrett.
Thank you.